Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now here's your host, who is very grateful for his audience and friends who helped make attending the NBA All-Star Tech Summit possible, Sean Callanan.
I'm Sean Callanan, and welcome to episode 409 of Sports Geek. In this bonus episode, that's right, 2 episodes this week, I look back at the NBA All-Star Tech Summit I attended in San Francisco. And as the intro said there, I'm very grateful for all the people that helped and assisted in allowing me to be there. As always, you can contact me at Sean Callanan on most social media networks. Please look for Sports Geek on YouTube and on your podcast players and find all of our podcasts, whether it be this one, our main interview series, Sports Geek Rapid Rundown, our daily episode, looking at the world of sports business and getting you up to date on a daily basis, or our Sports Geek Amplify series, where we dive into the tech of sports and how it can help you. If you listen to 408, which was only released a day or so ago, you would have learned and where I reviewed and pulled back the curtain on working at the Pro Bowl and Super Bowl. I did that with my producer, Dylan Parks. You'll know that I've been in the USA recently. It's well worth a listen, especially if you're in the execution mode. You're someone that creates content, manages channels, because we really dove deep on the why and sweating the copy and sweating the formats and picking the right platforms and choosing the collaborators. So it was a very, very behind the scenes. I know people in the working in digital teams will sort of listen to it with a nodding head. But if you're someone that manages a team, it's a really good insight into, hey, what is it like? What does it take to create great content and great social media content? Because that's what we really dove in on episode 408. So check that out. And so after the Super Bowl, since I was in the US and I looked at the calendar, I set my sights on San Francisco, primarily not for the All-Star weekend, although it's a lot of things happening that weekend, but more specifically the NBA All-Star Tech Summit. For those of you who don't know, the NBA All-Star Tech Summit, I think, started in year 2000, and it's the NBA's way of bringing in all of their key partners from a broadcast and technology point of view and trying to figure out what's next. And I've always been someone that watched it from afar and seen a few people that I know, people that have either been on the podcast or vendors to the NBA, posting about it and how great it was and really the networking opportunities there. So I just thought, well, I'm going to be in the States. I'll see if I can come along. Little did I realize the task that I set myself, that the NBA All-Star Tech Summit is the hardest ticket to obtain in sports and entertainment in a little way. It's not a ticket that's for sale. You can't purchase a spot. It's completely invite only. Yeah, and I started to get this feedback from when I was reaching out to friends in the NBA, whether they be people that I've worked with or people who've been on the podcast, people I know via associations, conferences like SEAT and NSF. And yeah, I got a lot of people saying, yeah, I'd love to go. I've been trying to go. I've worked in the NBA for 15 years. I've never got in. So that didn't deter me. I'd still locked in my tickets. I was still going to be in San Francisco at that time. I just continue. One of the things that I really do appreciate from my network is the effort they put in. But I think that's also part of the work that I put into my network as well in reaching out to people, offering advice, connecting them with the right people. So I think I had a fair few credits in the karma bank, if you will. So I just kept asking. Everyone I know, how do I get in? Who should I talk to? What's the way in? Do you have some sway? And luckily enough, those questions and that determinedness paid off. Luckily enough to catch up with my good friend Lara Toscani-Weems from Elevate while I was in New Orleans. And she said she knew some of the people in the NBA PR team, and she would give me the right names to reach out. When she did reach out, she found out what I'd already found out, that it was a really hot ticket. It was a really hard ticket. It was well and truly over. But her advice was, hey, send through your details. Tell them what you do as far as Sports Geek as a podcast and the things you do in talking about sports technology and connecting people, and the fact I've had a a few high-profile NBA guests. So I did that, and I got a reply, yes, it's oversubscribed. It's really hard to get in, but we'll put you on the wait list. So I took that small win as I was in New Orleans and then waiting to, go to San Francisco the week after. And so I got to New Orleans on the Thursday, again, specifically making sure I was going to be in there in San Francisco for this one day, this Friday, All-Star Tech Summit. That was the only reason I was going to San Francisco. I'd come all that way. I was still on the wait list. I hadn't heard anything. So I thought, well, there's no point sitting in my hotel and wondering or waiting. I headed into the Hilton there in San Francisco and immediately sort of knew, I guess the buzz around the hotel. So I was walking in, there was some familiar faces, some that I know personally and professionally, like Viv from WSC, who's been on the podcast, and I was lucky enough to say thank you. I really appreciate being able to use Clip Pro and everything that we do with the NFL accounts. But then there was also NBA owners walking in, like the Warriors owner Joe Laker, NBA legends like Pau Gasol, Yao Ming are walking in, and there was a lot of activity in the lobby. Obviously, potentially there were people in the lobby that weren't getting in. So 8 o'clock passed. I knew it all kicked off at 8:30. So I went through security and went up to the registration desk. Everyone was there. It was quite a packed room where everyone was trying to get their credentials to be able to get in. I went to the media desk and again introduced myself to Sean Callanan from Sports Geek. I've got my name down the wait list. So I was just wanting to check if there was a pass available. And unfortunately at that time they said, sorry, we're at capacity at the moment, but if you would like, you can hang around and see if someone doesn't show. And so that's pretty much what I did. I stayed in the registration area. There was some more familiar faces at registration. Jess Smith, who's now at the Golden State Valkyries, who's been on the podcast. Bob Morgan, who's a long time member at Facebook. I saw him there. And then Kevin Cote used to work at the Warriors and then at Meta, and now he's at Google, so doing some interesting things. So I felt I was in a familiar place and I knew a few people in the room. Eventually, 8:30 came and went, and the room started to thin out. And eventually, I think then Adam Silver went up to do the opening keynote. So the registration room was quite empty. I went back to the media desk and said, "Is there any more passes available? I'm happy to wait a little bit longer." And thankfully enough, they said I passed the hand over my business card, and they came back and handed me one of these, a pass to get in. And I must say, I was absolutely elated. It was a bit of a pinch me moment. One, not knowing how hard it was to get in, but also seeing, over 20 years of people that I know and respect talking about the Tech Summit and what was available. So when I finally got in there, it was a packed room, standing room only. The first panel was almost one of my favorite panels. It was Stream Tech, the next generation, really looking at, and again, it's always a debate with conferences, should you be having the same conversation or the same panel title year on year? I think this is one that should be year on year all the time, because the streaming tech and the next generation of fans and the next generation of viewers is always a pertinent issue. And so so on that panel, it definitely had the breadth of providers in that we had someone from YouTube, you had the chairman from ESPN, you had someone from Apple TV, you had Bella, who was the chief content officer for Netflix. You had someone from NBC. So it was a really wide mix, very much for the US market. But the fact it shows, like it is globally, that they were talking about the fractured nature of sport and sports rights, but also how they're going about chasing that younger fan. What does that younger fan want to watch? What kind of content do they want to watch? How do they bring that younger fan into the longer form game? Is that even possible? So one, I found that, terribly interesting. I think if I look at that initial panel and some of the key points out of it was, those viewership challenges. Then there was also that piece of, I guess, broadcast TV renaissance, the fact that even though there's all these streaming pieces, those big moments, whether they be Super Bowl, grand finals in my part of the world, people are still drawn to broadcast TV and the big screen. There was a lot of conversation around how AI and personalizing your content. So Jimmy Pitaro at ESPN talked about the concept of my ESPN, in that you'll open up the app and it will just be all catered to you. But one of the things that I did, when I look at that panel, and I really hope to, I met with Bella from Netflix after the event, after the panel. They were all talking about technology and what could be done in formats. And one of the things that she said was, storytelling and making people feel something, that never goes away. And, that's been Netflix's strength in its documentary series like Drive to Survive, and sort of been their first foray into the sports. I completely agree with that. People will tune in for that storytelling element and that story they want to cheer on. So, we've seen a lot of people tuning into the WNBA through Caitlin Clark. We've seen a lot of people tune into the NFL through the storytelling around Taylor Swift and her interaction with the NFL. So I think there was a lot in that. The other takeaway I got from that one was also, I just guess, the growth of YouTube as a destination, but then also sort of the piece that the creator economy, and thankfully I've got a really good podcast coming up with the CEO of Dude Perfect. But the fact that the creators, from a YouTube point of view, are really moving the needle, and they're not just influencers per se. We even saw that come to fruition with Mr. Beast, appearing on All-Star Sunday and effectively doing a segment, doing a video in there. So, and credit to the CEO of YouTube. He said he was talking about creators and YouTube creators 8 years ago at the Tech Summit. So, at some point, you are going to be right. You keep throwing out predictions, but yeah, I think that was one of the that was the first session. That was definitely the session, one of my highlight sessions for the Tech Summit. The second session was a bit more of a deeper dive with NVIDIA's Jensen Huang, sort of talking about AI, I guess the growth of AI, where it can be applied both in business but also in sport. And also he even discussed, because it only came out a couple of weeks earlier, the concept of deep link and the new Chinese AI that doesn't require a high chip and CPU processing. And rather than seeing it as a threat and, did affect the share price for NVIDIA pretty quickly, he saw it as, again, another opportunity for another leap forward for AI. There were some really good points in his discussion in sort of looking at how AI will be integrated into coaching and sort of analysis and video analysis of players. And then he sort of discussed the sort of broader pieces of, I guess, not being scared of AI. It's more how you go about using it. And the way he sort of described it was, the way that you ask AI to do something for you is the same as how a leader should be asking and inspiring people to do things for them. And so he talked about his use cases of getting a huge white paper and 70 pages and not reading it, but rather loading it into an AI model, whether it be Claude or ChatGPT, and then just having a conversation about the document rather than using it. So it was interesting to hear him, how he sort of goes about using it. I mean, the main thing that I took away, and it's something that I've strongly believed in, sort of leveraging AI and seeing what it can offer, was, somebody who uses AI can outperform someone who doesn't use AI. And that's as simple as it gets. And so I think from my point of view, if you haven't got a strategy around, one, how you want to use AI, and there's, I guess, two parts of it, whether it's that external data, everything that's outside of your business, how do you cut through the fog, and how do you cut through all the noise, and how do you cut through all that information to synthesize it to something being useful? That one is easier to execute and less risky. Then the second one is, what does that look like for your internal data? But then also, if you're looking at your internal data, how do you make sure that that internal data remains internal data? So they're the two things that I think are the starting points for what an AI strategy looks like. Be more than happy to discuss what we've been doing in the AI space in developing Sports Geek Reads and the Sports Geek Rapid Rundown. I think there's a real opportunity for sports to take on board these assets and I guess these technologies, because I think what they do is, as Jensen said, allow you to outperform what you should perform if you're just doing it by yourself. And so what can you get with that incremental gain is really important. Then the second panel of the day was more looking at investment strategies and following the money and the investment strategies around sports tech. And some of it was more around the fact that the leagues and the teams are growing in value because they are premium. There is real scarcity. There's only 30 NBA teams. There's no more. You can't just go and buy one off the shelf. That has helped lift the value. But then also looking at things like the intellectual property of a league and a team and a player. It was their opinion that it was largely undervalued. And then I think the other piece was the stuff around how they could use AI and data analysis of the data. Like there's a lot of data around player wellness and health, how that is being, I guess, leveraged and made sure that, NBA players, but then all athletes can best perform. That those enhancements, whether they be across sleep, recovery, rehab, those kind of things, I think that will be some of the key things that will continue to be discussed at like the NBA Tech Summit, but also will be a key point of where that money does flow. And then what we will see is the advances that we do see at the high level, we will start seeing them flow through to more of a consumer type product, whether that be advances in Fitbits and Apple Watches and Apple Health and those kind of things. So currently, the things that say LeBron James, who's reportedly spending $1 million a year on his body to continue to do the freakish things that he does at 40 years old, that price, thanks to AI and I guess machine learning and access to more CPUs, that price will come down and that will be more accessible by more people. So it's going to be interesting to see how that develops. The other piece of that investment strategy, especially for those investing in leagues, whether they be established leagues like the NBA or new leagues that we're seeing pop up, whether they be new football leagues, new basketball leagues, new leagues for our new sports like pickleball and the like, is trying to analyze the data for that predictor of fandom. And so a lot of the data we have seen in the past, getting a kid playing sport, before the age of 10. One of the ones that was mentioned at the conference was the best predictor of fandom is a kid going to a game before they turn 14. So how do they make sure that those kids that are currently consuming content, they might be doing it through YouTube creators, that might be their entry point into the NBA, when it was previously it might have been an NBA countdown or a Saturday morning show like that has shifted. But then also, how do you make the game accessible so they can come to a game to lock in their fandom? So that was some of the things that, it was a pretty broad discussion around the investments piece, but I think there's more available. And then the third panel was very, very much future focused. Tell us about tomorrow, understanding the complex forces and shaping the future. And so this one did get really geeky really quickly in talking about, how AI could be used. But one of the things that I found fascinating, and I think it was, I'm just trying to remember who the name of the panelists. If I quickly jump here, I can find it. I think it was Kevin Wheel from OpenAI. He talked about using AI and how much AI is disrupting computer programming. Okay, so that's an industry I used to be in. I was 15 years a computer programmer, and literally 2 months ago, I have not coded in 15 years while I've been doing Sports Geek. I don't count cutting and pasting HTML as coding. But I just went to Claude and said, hey, I'm going to start coding again. You're going to help me do it. And that's how we built Sports Geek Reads. So if you go to reads.sportsgeekhq.com, that's a fully fledged Reddit-looking curated side of sports business links that are pulled in every day. I would not have been able to build that 6 months ago because my coding skills are too rusty and the language that I learned is no longer relevant. But yeah, one of the stats was ChatGPT currently is in the top. I'd have to look at I think he was saying the top 175 programmers in the world, but in the next few developments, it'll be in the top 1% of the world. So again, going back to Jensen's quotes around NVIDIA, like you've got to start talking to these AI operators that are computer programmers like currently they're junior programmers. But in a few months' time, they will be senior programmers. They will be able to build things. And it'll all come down to the people who can provide the specs, who can be really clear on what they want and be really clear on what they don't want and have a real test mindset to be able to spot where there are errors, because junior programmers make errors. And so junior AI programmers will also make errors. So making sure that you've got people that can think in, what are the requirements? What are the outputs? What are the things that we want? Because now you've got, talented, ready to go programmers at your disposal. You're still going to obviously need a project manager or someone that can specify the requirements and potentially someone that might specify what the testing that you want around it. But the ability to go from, I like that idea, I want to build it, used to be, I've got to write it down, I've got to tell a developer something, that developer's got to come back. And in my 15 years, I've seen many sports industry folk unfortunately get fleeced by either chonky developers, which is one of the reasons I started Sports Geek, or just developers that aren't very good. Because developers aren't very good, guess what? They take ages, they cost a lot, and they don't deliver what you actually asked for. And so what these AI operators now can give you is the ability to fastly iterate, get a minimum viable product up, and actually test, hey, does this idea work? Can we get it right? And then you can go to someone with more structure, but you've actually got an 85% delivered product by there. So then some of the other stuff, there was a little bit of overlap around the using AI to predict risks for athletes, such as ACL tears and bone issues, and provide personalized training and nutrition. I think that one's got a little bit more ways to go, because I think it will be the case of trying to convince, the sports physiologists and all of the physical therapists that, hey, they know their way. Are they ready to be disrupted? There's already a conversation both in the NBA and many sports around load management. Will coaches and players take advice from an AI that says you need to train less? But I think there was discussion also around how to use generative AI to improve the fan experience. Back to that point around personalizing the fan experience. How can you, whether that be with a chatbot, with something that's conversational or even voice now, how can you use that to improve the fan experience? Again, that's going to be one that I totally expect to become more and more common. But again, it will come down to, how do you test that experience? How do you make sure that it doesn't feel like there's a robot at the end of that conversation? So I enjoyed that one. I enjoyed the geeking out, but also just that insight of how disruptive AI is going to be to computer programmers. But computer programming has been disrupted and has disrupted itself for many, many years, whether it be changes in architecture and changes in code and changes in code styles and platforms. The smart people and the smart people in the computer programming space will be the ones that will be able to marshal a team of AI developers. And so that will be the key thing from a computer programming point of view. But from a sports point of view, there's some really exciting options to be able to, produce more and test, to use Mark Zuckerberg's phrase, move fast and break things. You'll be able to move fast and break things really quickly. And then once you do realize what works and what doesn't work, that's when you can move forward with those pieces. I think there will be a lot of work done in plugging the gaps and plugging the issues in integration that we see a lot in sports. Data comes in here and needs to get over there, but there's not a custom connector. We can't quite get that to work. I think that's where there's a lot of opportunity to go, well, actually, I can get that to work. I just need to tell my AI developer, this is my inputs, this is where I want to go, this is where I want to end up, this is how often it comes through, this is how it gets triggered. How do I get that to there? Rather than it being stuck in no man's land in a manual process, or worse, a never gets integrated process. So, yeah, I think that's going to be a real interesting space. It's obviously something that we're leaning into at Sports Geek, sort of using all the different products and seeing which one works well for us. Then one of the other sessions, which was what, again, I did really like the streaming session at the start, but I did really enjoy the conversation between Bob Costas and Steve Kerr, Warriors championship coach. I've just recently finished Steve Kerr's book. I really respect him as both a player and a coach. And so he sort of, he discussed both his philosophy on coaching and the importance of perspective and team culture. And he really lent into what, his coach, Greg Popovich at the Spurs, would bring in worldly perspective into daily rituals and to keep perspective to elite athletes. You can get separated from the real world. So he sort of took a lot of that from Pop, and then he did discuss the evolution of the NBA and the fact that they may have started it, but everyone's now shooting threes all the time. His summation of that is, well, you can complain about it, but you've got to keep shooting threes to stay in the game. There was some really interesting pieces also, and he's got some really good perspective because he'd spent time in different parts of the world growing up, but sort of looking at the European players and the American players. He was of the opinion, and I tend to agree, is that the European players have the advantage of playing multiple sports as they grow up. They're not just playing basketball; they're playing soccer, or they're doing track, or they're playing other sports. It gives them a little bit more of a rounded, I guess, perspective, and I guess just a different way to tackle a game. So yeah, I'm an unabashed Steve Kerr fan. There was actually even a joke there where they were talking about Steve Kerr's famed Michael Jordan practice where he got punched in the face by Michael Jordan for sort of actually standing up to him and playing some defense. And then he joked, just imagine if that happened in the NBA today. And then he went, hang on, scratch that, to much laughter, obviously referring to the Draymond Green, Jordan Poole punching incident just for a couple of seasons ago. So ability to laugh at things and keep things light. But like I said, really appreciated Steve Kerr's insight from that chat with Bob Costas. And then the last session, which is a really good one to sort of wrap a bow in the conference, was all about leadership. And it was led by TNT's Ernie Johnson, and sort of looking at the different panelists. And we had Sabrina Ionescu and Jalen Brunson and Victor Wembanyama, as well as some military leaders. I'll get the military. We had Michael Rubin from Fanatics and General Martin Dempsey from the US Army. So it was a real diverse leadership group and sort of talking about what leadership means to them, how it's changing, the focus on continuous improvement. I think there was a lot in that, in both getting it from a US decorated general to someone like Jalen Brunson, who's leading the New York Knicks, to a 21-year-old Victor Wembanyama, who, even though he's in his second season, he's displaying leadership qualities. And Ernie did ask him, how does he be a leader when you've got one of the greatest coaches of all time, Greg Popovich, and then Chris Paul, who's almost twice his age, and a long-time NBA veteran and leader. And Victor's response was, I guess, paying homage to both of those, the fact that both Coach Pop and Chris Paul were allowing Victor to lead, but he was always a sponge in learning more from all of those players. And yeah, it was a good way to wrap up the Tech Summit. Now that's just all the content, right? And so I got a lot from the content. Every time the session happened, Ahmad Rashad would come out and say, "Hey, we're just going to have a quick break. We'll be back in 10 minutes." And there was so, again, I now know why it's such a hot ticket. It was, the networking was, phenomenal. So again, lucky enough to see Jay Riola from the Orlando Magic, who was who was there and has been on the podcast. It was great to catch up with Jay. Good to catch up with a few other people, but one person that really impressed me, and I still hold hope that I will get him on the podcast. That I went up and introduced myself to Alexis O'Hanlon. If you don't know who Alexis is, he's the he's a founder of Reddit, and now, if I get it right, he's now running Ohanian, I should say, not Hanlon. He's now running 776, I think it's called, which is an investment firm, but primarily looking at sports investments and primarily women's sports investments. So, I'd love to have a chat to him. Angel City FC is one of his investments, and a few others that he's making in the space. Unfortunately, after a quick chat, he said, unfortunately, I normally pass on most podcast opportunities because of it sometimes gets him in trouble with the share price and things like that if he says the wrong thing on a podcast. But what impressed me most, I handed over my business card and Alexa said, "Thank you." And he scanned it quickly and got my contact details. He said, "Look, I'm going to connect you with my PR folk. I'm going to decline, but I really do appreciate it." And then he actually said, "Do you use Riverside?" And I said, "I do. I'm recording this episode right now on Riverside FM." He said, "Thank you." He was an early investor. So absolutely, in Australia, I would say he's absolute top bloke. But what blew me away was as soon as we parted, literally 90 seconds later, I got an email. "Hey, I've already warned Sean that we probably can't do the podcast, but I'm connecting you. Sean, thanks for using the Riverside. I really appreciate it." And he'd said that in the 10 seconds he'd walked away. And that, it reminded me of Mark Cuban, who again sort of just stays at the top of his inbox, and his inbox is zeros because he just sees something, just deals with it, delegates it, and done. And it's something that I want to aspire to, not sitting on something or I'll reply to that later, that discipline to do that straight away, get it off his plate. Now off his plate. Now it's up to me to go back and reach out and potentially interview him down the track, but most likely I'll just interview all of the great investments and teams that he's invested in. So that was one of my highlights overall. Then also seeing all those Boston Dynamic robots, which I did see, Adam Silver and the Warriors present at the start. I'll put the YouTube clip in the show notes for this. It was a bit of tongue in cheek in talking about how robots could be used in an NBA sense, but seeing those Boston Dynamic robots in person was a little bit scary. It was a little bit Terminator-like, but $150,000 they go for, and they'll do circuits of your factory and check things are safe and those kind of things. So I can see their purpose. Yeah, I think it'll be a little bit longer till we start seeing them at sports events, but you never know. So that's pretty much my wrap up of the NBA All-Star Tech Summit. I guess my only other note is a shout out and a thank you to Kenny Lauer, a good friend of mine who used to run the marketing at the Warriors, to invite me along to Steph Curry's All-Star Game brunch. So I went there on the Sunday. Did not expect to turn around and see Steph Curry just having some eggs for the morning, but it was great to catch up with Kenny and sort of be part of that All-Star weekend buzz. Also great to see Daniel Brusilewski in the back of the room there at the All-Star Summit. I know it was a busy weekend for him, hosting everyone at the Chase Centre, which did an amazing job. And, congrats to you, Brew. Really, really great to see the success you're having. And then, again, as I sort of said at the top, I'm just super grateful that the amount of people that I've connected with, interviewed, helped, I guess I think they all pulled in the right direction to get me to the All-Star Summit. I hope to go again. I don't want to tempt fate and think, hey, I can go every year. But the reason I'm doing this podcast is I've found a terrific value. I think the NBA is doing some great things in the space. And, I'm an NBA fan at heart, and I really do appreciate some of the stuff they do in the technology space. It definitely makes the game more accessible globally, and definitely my part of the world. The NBA is well entrenched here in Australia with a lot of fans. So that's it for this episode, this double episode, 2 for the week, recapping. So episode 408 was recapping all things NFL and Super Bowl and Pro Bowl games and how we went about it. And I did that with my digital producer, Dylan Parks. And then this one, recapping all things NBA All-Star Week, but primarily the Tech Summit. I really do appreciate the support from everyone who listens. I really do appreciate the people that reached out while I was in the States, some that I was able to connect with and some that I was not able to connect with due to the manic nature of those 3 weeks. But I really do appreciate both your listenership and your attention and your support. But until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Do you want a detailed review of your conference? Why not book Sean as a keynote speaker or moderator? We can even host a live episode of Sports Geek on your conference stage. Contact Sean for more options. Please subscribe to the Sports Geek YouTube channel, interviews and extras now available on YouTube. Want your team to improve? We specialize in helping under-resourced teams over-deliver. Please get in touch. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call. All Sports Geek episodes are just a click away at sportsgeekhq.com.